Hello everybody. Today, as Bart introduced, I'm an architect and a PhD researcher on rhythm in cities. The title of my research is Designing Rhythms for Social Resilience. And today I'm going to share with you my experience of starting with being interested in rhythm as an architect, as an architecture student, which then followed on as a researcher, first at TU Delft and now at the University of Amsterdam as a PhD. First of all, I would like to start with a definition. This is a definition that we've been using in the past 2 years for working in order to make rhythm a bit more applicable. It's a definition of national Dutch philosopher Marnie Heyer, and she says, rhythm is variation in repetition in a given structure. What's very interesting in this definition is we have two factors that I highlighted with different colors. First of all, there's a certain repetition that highlights a structure. But on the other hand, within this repetition, we have a variation. So if we apply this definition to our daily lives, for example, it could be that I, as a commuter to work every day, I'm taking the train at the same time every day. But then within this repetition, so it's a repetitive factor that I do something every day, I will probably wear different clothes every day. I will be sitting to a different person every day. Or maybe on the newspaper, I will read something different every day. And this is the variation factor, and we need this variation in our lives. We need this rhythm. And in our research into rhythm in cities, we find ourselves asking questions such as, but then in a city, how much repetition do we need to sort of have an urban structure? How much repetition does an urban structure have? Or what creates this variation? How much variation can we need? Not to have maybe a dispersed notion of rhythm. And then, what is this repetition anyway in a city? What is the scale of it? Is it a repetition that you perceive in a street? Is it something that you have in a neighborhood? And then the last big question that we're asking, thanks to this whole availability of big, large urban data, is how do we use digital tools to trace these variation and repetition and the rhythm? So before I explain what I'm up to right now with rhythm, I would like to open a small chapter on where I started with rhythm. And what you see here is my graduation project, which took place in 2015 at the architecture faculty of Delft University. And the location of this project is Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I had never been to Addis Ababa before, so it was a great, I really used this chance of being a foreigner in this setting to gather as much information as possible. And what you see here is this is a housing project. And I was part of this program that we had to redesign an area, a neighborhood. But then Addis Ababa has a very particular case here because it is a city of 80% of informal settlements. It consists of what we call also here as slums. And this, as the country develops, a lot of demolition is happening, a lot of reconstruction is happening. And this scenario is very familiar to me because I also come from a city which is in continuous development. It's Istanbul. And I've been, in the past 10 years that I've been away from Istanbul, I've just watched this being swiped away by, everything, and now I cannot even recognize it anymore. So I was thinking, okay, so we need this development in a certain way, let's put it that way, but then how do we contain something from it? And there I was fascinated about this rhythm theory, also as Anton was speaking by reading Henri Lefebvre. So I tried to make a rhythm design. So I created a structure, repetitive structure, in which the people could make their own variation on, and a bit romanticizing by this factor of appropriation and everything. But in order to arrive to that stage, I made a rhythm analysis. So now I will introduce this rhythm analysis. It's an attempt to make a rhythm analysis. As you can see, I did the analysis in 3 different locations. First in a slum area, the second was a social housing district, and the third was a business district. And I chose these 3 locations because they were for me the 3 completely different urban realities that I was seeing in the city. And as a result of my analysis, I came up with the fact that in slum area there were very vibrant rhythms, very different rhythms, while in social housing district I came up with more flat rhythms, and then in business district there were more dispersed rhythms. So how did I do this? It started by setting 3 parameters to analyze, to map, and to document. And these were the 3 things that I found very attractive from the urban environment. So the first is additional elements. These were the elements that the citizens were attaching to the buildings to sort of create their own space, their own activities, and they did change the flow of the neighborhood because they would create a new thing there, and people would pass by, they would slow down, or they would go faster. So that for me was the first parameter to keep in my analysis. The second one is gathering points. So these are also specific locations where people would choose to come by, but without any specific necessary structure. It would just happen, and I would observe that every day a group of people would be standing in the same location, maybe a corner of the building or a crossing of the street. So for me that was important to keep in mind. And the third one, of course, are the repetitive actions, so the activities that we have also like in every city in the world, like hours that the children go to school, or when the bread is freshly baked, or the working hours. So these were what I called repetitive actions. The analysis started by mapping because, as architects, we map a lot of things when we do analysis. And so I was mapping everything, trying to make as much as documentation, as much as sketches, as much as videos, to also bring back home. This is the map of the slum area, by the way, so I will show it from the slum area. And the next one was that, okay, so I have this mapping, let's create a certain abstraction to it, because I really want to come to the rhythm factor. I want to go more than this whole just mapping of the functions. And then I realized that, okay, then I have a structure right now, but what I miss is the variation. So what is it that creates the variation? So in a certain way, I saw as the variation the difference between one parameter and the other. And then this was the rhythm that I came up with from the slum area. What's interesting here, what you will all realize, that it's a completely subjective analysis. Another person who does this analysis in Addis Ababa or wherever in the world, they might come up with different parameters, first of all. They might give different variations. They might choose not to give a variation. But for me, this was a way to arrive to my own reality by using subjectivity. And it was a way to, get new design ideas, to get a new perspective of what's happening. And it really helped for me to formulate a new understanding of what I was looking at. Okay, moving on. I will now go introduce the City Rhythm project. So the participants have received goodie bags where there are these City Rhythm books. I will now shortly introduce what this project is about. It's a highly interdisciplinary project. It started at Delft University of Technology by Caroline Nevean. Her name was mentioned by Bas van Sprook today. The project engaged researchers, students from 3 different universities, as well as 6 cities. So this research was financed by 6 cities of the Netherlands. The reason that these cities engaged in this research was because they wanted a new perspective in the social issues that they were facing, and they were trying to find a solution for years, but nothing was happening. So they thought that rhythm was an interesting factor to consider in what's happening in a city. And as a result, we had 2 major results. One is a methodology for formulating a rhythm perspective of a social issue. And the second one is a city rhythm data model, which was led by the data team of Scott Cunningham. I was more part of the architectural and urban analysis of this project. We started out with, so we had 6 cities. In each 6 city, there were different questions that they wanted to address. So I will go very quickly to give you an idea of what we were dealing with. And in The Hague, we had the issue with refugees in a housing block. So the people weren't feeling safe from the fact that, or they had negative feelings for the fact that there are refugees arriving to their neighborhood. So what can we do about it? In Zoetermeer and in Helmond, the question was very generic. It's about, we have a street where people don't feel safe. What can we do about it? In Rotterdam, we had an issue with senior citizens who weren't feeling safe. And in Amsterdam, we had the issue with single mothers who didn't participate in the activities offered by the municipality. So, very different questions. I will now explain 3 of them, because it takes too much time otherwise. So let's start with Zaanstad. Did I introduce? Yeah. In Zaanstad, we had the issue with people not feeling safe in a square because they were young citizens. It's an issue that's very popular in the Netherlands with younger, which I find very strange to understand as an outsider. And here we had a student group who intervened. So in each of these projects we had a group of students who, from different backgrounds of medicine, economics, who were just going there and bringing their knowledge to do analysis. In Zaanstad, where we had the issue with these young people who were hanging out in a square, affecting very negatively the safety perception of other people, the students chose to analyze what's happening in the square. So in that sense, they gathered different rhythms or different factors that were influencing the rhythm of the square. So the first one is the shop opening hours. The second one is the lunchtime, where everybody would be out in the square. The third is the hours where the public transport is very intense. The fourth one is when the bike traffic is very intense. The fifth one is when the youngsters are outside hanging out around. And the last one is when the car traffic is very intense in unconventional hours. So the students, which we also call researchers in this case, they produce these graphs, which is a rhythm overview of the square. And what they came out with, that actually maybe the problem is not so much related with the young people. Why don't we consider it as a rhythm problem, meaning that between 5 and 6 we see a high rhythm intensity. It's also the time that the young people are present in the square. Can we do something about it? Maybe can we change the bike traffic? So their proposal was to change the bike traffic. But already looking here, you can maybe propose something completely different. For example, I would also propose, why don't we have more people there on the square? Why don't we have more activities so that you don't have any prevailing rhythms? But what's important here is to have this new perspective, new formulation of a social issue or any issue in a neighborhood. And that's where we found out that rhythm had a chance of creating a different perspective. Next is in Amsterdam Southeast, in Zuidoost, where we had the issue with single mothers. So the municipality came to us saying that, yeah, we've been investing a lot to find ways to involve more single mothers from different age groups and different, but mostly lower economic income levels. And yeah, also there the students made a rhythm analysis first on the daily life of these mothers. But then it turned out that yes, they have sometimes different jobs and their life is very much structured based on their kids. But there are other rhythms that they're participating, not necessarily from the municipality, which are very bureaucratic rhythms. Yes, it's possible that the municipality has opening hours which go on also later sometimes. But it's really about the engagement. So, so in the first graph you see the daily rhythms, but in the second graph you see the networks that the single mothers have a chance to engage. It's actually, as also Bas he was talking about that beforehand, and he saw that they also that, okay, there is a chance to reach the single mothers through these networks then, and they're now investing on these networks. Okay, I will move on to the last case, which is in Rotterdam, and the question was with the elderly who were not feeling safe to go outside of their homes. This is a neighborhood in Rotterdam, it's outskirts of Rotterdam, where there are not so many functions. It's very green and very empty, and the only public function there is a shopping center where people could come together. And after many interviews with the elderly, it turned out that they were also very intimidated by this group of young people. And that's why they really didn't choose to go out of their homes after, for example, in the afternoons. And so the students made these rhythm graphs, which shows that in the yellow one, I don't know if you can distinguish the colors, it shows the rhythm of the elderly of going out. So it's the amount of people who were going out from the homes around those times. And the pink one is the one that the young people are present. So you see that these two rhythms never engage together almost. And the rhythm intervention was here, yeah, we call this a rhythm intervention to sort of, yeah, to change the patterns or propose a new pattern, was to create a service design where these two target groups could be engaged together. And this was actually a quite successful intervention. They even made a business study about it and a website. So people reacted quite good to this intervention. As a result of these case studies, we formulated a methodology for formulating the rhythm perspective. You see that it makes a curve. It's like steps of analysis that you can follow to formulate a social issue into the rhythm issue, to get a new perspective. And you see that it makes a curve because you start from the social domain, and then at a certain point you go to the rhythm domain, but then you come back to the social domain to make sense of what you did and to make it a good conclusion for rhythm intervention. So this is what I want to say. And the next one is what we did with the data team. The data team was led by scientist Scott Cunningham, and this is the data model that was produced. So let's take a step back and let's see this data model as a black box where we put lots of urban data in. The urban data that was put in this box was, for example, information on demographics, on proximity, on how much green you have in the neighborhood, how many functions do you have in the neighborhood. So they all go into this box, and the data model makes a selection of the most prevailing combinations of rhythms. So it came out with 7 base rhythms, what we called. Base rhythm is a generic description of a neighborhood. For example, a neighborhood could be a social housing neighborhood. It could be or let's call another neighborhood or a district. It could be a shopping mall district. And what we see here with all these dots is that they're districts of 500 meters per 500 meters, and they all have a different base rhythm. I mean, they all have a base rhythm, which are 7 base rhythms. And what you see on the right hand of the screen, the curves, they are the beats. A beat is the variation that a neighborhood can have throughout the time. The data that we used was between 2010 and 14. So let's say that, for example, each year something different happened in this neighborhood. The street got a bit larger, or they built new trees. But what's interesting is that we don't know what this is. We don't know what base rhythm 1 is. We don't know what beat 2 is. We just know that there are these differences between one district and other, based on location, based on time, and this matters somehow, because when we combine these between one city and another, they come back and have a conversation. They say, oh, you also have a base rhythm 1 in your neighborhood where I have this issue. Okay, let's come together and talk. So again, it's a matter of giving a different perspective. So these are the 7 base rhythms. I want to emphasize on the base rhythms because also it's the starting point of our new research. These are the 7 base rhythms of the cities. Do you see that? Do you feel like it has something interesting? For example, our first conclusions was that, oh, okay, the blue in Rotterdam I see it in the harbor area, and in Amsterdam I see it in the outskirts of the city. So maybe it has something there. It's something where there are not many functions. Or the reds, they appear mostly in the inner city. So it can mean that it's an inner city neighborhood. Those who are a bit familiar with what they see around, I don't know if this resonates with you, but we asked this question many times to the civil servants that were presenting this research, and their answer was that yes, but then what is it? But we don't know what it is yet. I will go on for the next research. So right now I'm a PhD in this research called Designing Rhythms for Social Resilience. We just received the funding and we're starting for the next 4 to 5 years. And we have it in 2 perspectives. So one is the architecture perspective, where we want to gather, do an analysis on the physical level. And the second one is the data perspective. And we want to explore altogether rhythm as a design tool, as a tool that you can work with, not only from the social perspective, but also from the design perspective. And what rhythm design can be is that, as an architect, I give example of an architectural design, for example. How we start to design is that, yes, we first have a plan, we have the section, we have drawings, and then we have this, we start imagining the occupation of it, we start programming it, and then afterwards we get a rhythm. And mostly the methods that we use for communicating our designs are very static. We make images, we make plans, and images, yeah, if you see that, if a square looks very flat, you just add some trees and it looks a bit more fancy. But then it doesn't mean that it's going to be like that. You can put more people in this image. But maybe rhythm-based design could change. It could mean that you first think about the rhythm that a design can generate, and then you go on by focusing on the rhythm, you can go to the design. So this is an approach that we want to explore in this research. And finally, to start, we want this research takes place in Amsterdam Southeast. We want to take the 7 base rhythms of Amsterdam Southeast into account and try to understand if our previous approach actually makes sense in analyzing the neighborhood through urban data. We don't know it. We also don't know if these 7 rhythms will resonate, but we're going to try to use different methods and see how it turns out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.